and the Golden Bear with his 6th green jacket.
Jack Nicklaus, known around the world as the Golden Bear, was born in Columbus in 1940, and that nickname would become one of the most powerful brands in sports history. It wasn't just a symbol of dominance on the course, it became a symbol of consistency, discipline, and eventually, financial intelligence. Growing up in Columbus, Nicklaus was introduced to golf at the age of 10 at Scalability Country Club, and by 12, he was already winning junior tournaments. But what separated him early wasn't just talent, it was structure. His father instilled patience, discipline, and an understanding that success wasn't just about winning, it was about building something that lasted. By the time Nicklaus reached his late teens, he had already become one of the top amateur golfers in the country, and at 21 years old, he made the decision to turn professional in 1961. When Jack Nicklaus entered professional golf, there were no massive contracts, no guaranteed millions, and no safety net. In his rookie season in 1962, the same year he defeated Arnold Palmer in a playoff to win the US Open at just 22 years old, Nicklaus earned roughly $60,000 to $70,000 in total prize money. That was elite for the time, but even adjusted for inflation, it was nowhere near the level of wealth we associate with modern athletes. As his career progressed into the mid-1960s, his earnings steadily increased. By 1963, he crossed around $100,000 in annual winnings, and by 1965, during one of his most dominant stretches, he was earning roughly $140,000 to $150,000 per year. By the late 1960s, Nicklaus was consistently among the top earners in golf, bringing in around $175,000 to $200,000 annually. But even as the best player in the world, the financial ceiling of tournament golf was clear. Across his entire PGA Tour career, Jack Nicklaus would earn just over $5.7 million in official prize money. That number is shocking when you compare it to today's players, who can earn that in a single season. But what makes Nicklaus different is that he understood early on that tournament winnings were not the path to real wealth. While other players focused on cashing checks week to week, Nicklaus was thinking bigger. In his late 20s and early 30s, while still dominating the sport and stacking major championships, he began laying the foundation for something far more powerful than prize money. He began building a business. As the 1970s approached, Nicklaus's annual earnings from tournaments hovered between $200,000 and $300,000 depending on performance, occasionally pushing slightly higher in dominant years. But instead of chasing marginal increases in prize money, he shifted his focus toward ownership and scalability. This is where the Golden Bear separated himself from nearly every athlete of his era. He understood that his name carried value far beyond the golf course, and he made the decision to turn that name into an asset. That decision led to the creation of Nicklaus Design, a company that would ultimately define his financial legacy. Through Nicklaus Design, he began designing golf courses around the world. But this wasn't just about architecture, it was about leverage. By the early 1980s, a single Nicklaus-designed course could generate between $500,000 and over $1 million in design and consulting fees. But the real money wasn't in the upfront payment, it was in what came with it. Developers weren't just paying for a golf course, they were paying for the Golden Bear brand. That brand allowed them to sell luxury homes at higher prices, market entire communities, attract international buyers, and significantly increase property values. Because of that, Nicklaus was able to negotiate not just fees, but influence, licensing deals, and long-term revenue participation. While he might earn $20,000 to $50,000 for winning a tournament at the time, a single business deal could generate exponentially more. As his playing career moved into the 1980s, his business empire began to scale globally. Nicklaus Design expanded into Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and Australia, eventually contributing to more than 400 golf courses worldwide. Each new course strengthened his brand, and as his brand grew stronger, his pricing power increased. This created a compounding effect where every project made the next one more valuable. While younger stars would eventually dominate headlines, including Tiger Woods in the late 1990s, Nicklaus had already positioned himself in a completely different financial category. He was no longer just an athlete, he was infrastructure within the sport. Then in 1986, at the age of 46, long past what most would consider an athlete's prime, Jack Nicklaus delivered one of the most iconic moments in sports history by winning the Masters tournament at Augusta National Golf Club. That victory didn't just add another major championship to his record, it revitalized his brand globally. It proved longevity, it reinforced credibility, and it extended his earning power by decades. Suddenly, Nicklaus wasn't just a legend of the past, he was still relevant in the present, and that relevance translated directly into business opportunities. By the 1990s, Nicklaus's income had completely shifted away from tournaments and into large-scale deals. His earnings were no longer tied to performance. They were tied to ownership, partnerships, and global expansion. Industry estimates suggest that during peak years, his business ventures were generating tens of millions of dollars annually. This is where the transformation was complete. From athlete to empire builder, from income to assets, from short-term winnings to long-term wealth. But to really understand how far ahead Nicklaus was, you have to compare his mindset to the era he played in. Most athletes at the time were focused on maximizing immediate income because there was no clear blueprint for what came after sports. Financial advisors weren't as common, endorsement structures weren't as developed, and global branding wasn't nearly as accessible. Nicklaus essentially had to create his own roadmap. He studied opportunities, built relationships with developers, and positioned himself as more than just a golfer. He became a partner in projects, not just a participant. And that shift from participant to partner is one of the most important financial lessons in sports history. Because when you're a participant, you get paid once. When you're a partner, you get paid over and over again. Nicklaus understood that at a time when almost no one else did, and that's why his wealth didn't just grow, it compounded. What makes Nicklaus's story even more powerful is his discipline. He didn't chase every endorsement opportunity. He didn't overextend himself. He didn't dilute his brand. Instead, he protected it, grew it strategically, and aligned himself with long-term value. That allowed him not only to build wealth, but to preserve it. Because building wealth is one thing, but keeping it is where most people fail. Nicklaus succeeded at both, and there's another layer to this that often gets overlooked. Nicklaus didn't just build wealth for himself, he built a family business ecosystem. Over time, his children became involved in different parts of his ventures, particularly within Nicklaus Design and related business operations. This created continuity, allowing the brand to extend beyond a single lifetime. Instead of wealth disappearing after retirement, it evolved into a multi-generational enterprise. That's a completely different level of thinking compared to most athletes, who often operate on a career timeline rather than a legacy timeline. Another critical piece of his financial strategy was timing. Nicklaus entered the business side of golf before the massive global boom of the sport. That meant he wasn't competing in a crowded market. He was helping define it. When international markets began investing heavily in golf communities and luxury developments in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, the Golden Bear name was already established as the gold standard. That gave him first-mover advantage, and first-mover advantage in business often leads to the highest margins and the strongest long-term positioning. And when you compare that to today's athlete economy, the contrast becomes even more powerful. Modern golfers can earn tens of millions annually through prize money, endorsements, and sponsorship bonuses, but many are still operating within an active income model. If they stop performing, the income slows down. Nicklaus built something that didn't rely on performance at all. His income became tied to assets, intellectual property, and global demand for his brand. That's why decades after his final competitive round, he's still earning, still relevant, still scaling. In many ways, Nicklaus didn't just build a business, he built a financial philosophy that modern athletes are only now starting to understand. Ownership over endorsement, equity over salary, longevity over short-term wins. And that philosophy is now being replicated by the next generation of athletes across multiple sports, not just golf. When you step back and look at the full picture, Jack Nicklaus didn't just dominate golf, he redefined what it meant to be a successful athlete. He turned less than $6 million in playing earnings into a global empire worth hundreds of millions. He understood leverage before it became a buzzword. He chose ownership over income. And in doing so, he created a system that continues to generate wealth long after his playing days ended. Jack Nicklaus didn't just win majors, he built a machine. And once that machine was running, it never stopped. Jack Nicklaus proved that greatness isn't measured by what you win, but by what you build after the winning is over.